Okay, it is recording. Hello, everybody. This is the 13th session for our how to teach videos. Today might be a little bit shorter than usual. We'll see how it plays out. And we're also not going to spend a crazy amount of time in the PowerPoint. We're going to spend more time out of the PowerPoint, I think. And we're going to talk about one way to structure a lesson. Often teachers kind of wonder, like, how can I go about teaching a class? How can I go about organizing it? What do I teach first? What do I teach second? How do I teach it? And there's some confusion around that. So I thought today it'd be useful if I just gave one kind of formula that can work for all levels, all languages. It's something you can always kind of do. It's in many ways kind of a cop-out, actually. It's kind of like a cop-out, because you could literally just kind of do this all the time, and students will generally think you're a very competent teacher and think like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. It's kind of one of those one-size-fits-all answers in a way. Now, I don't think you should always kind of structure things this way, because I think that with certain students, certain classes, it's maybe not always the best way to go about things, especially, for example, if you are working with younger kids. Like if you're working with 5-year-olds, I don't think this is great. If you're working with 10, 11, 12, you could probably get away with this too. But again, certain classes will probably, it's not going to be the most effective strategy for certain types of personalities in classes. But regardless, this is a very kind of common way you could structure a class. But first, a reminder, this is very important. I get lots of strange comments about me talking about financials, but I believe in it so much, and I think it's so important. So just a reminder, we talked about this last time. I just copy pasted the same slides. Remember, when you work as a tutor, your hours can fluctuate, crazy things can happen, your car can break, rent increases, COVID, for crying out loud, layoffs, losing your jobs, pay cuts, like things happen. So you need to have savings. Having savings is very important. And in fact, that's important whether you're a tutor or whether you work in a different industry. It's important for everybody, but especially for tutors, I think, because it's that kind of industry can definitely have some fluctuations in hours and number of students. So very, very important to have savings. So I think it's important to figure out. I'm not a financial expert. I'm not the one who's going to give you do this. Like, that's not my place per se, but even I can encourage you to do your own research on it. How do you save? How much do you save? What do you do if you don't earn enough to save? How do you cut your expenses? How do you earn more? Like, that's stuff that I'll talk about it from time to time, but something that I want everybody to think about, because I think it's important. We talked very quickly last time. We actually talked a lot last time about how much to save. So we'll just go through it very rapidly again, because it's important. So I kind of picture it like this. Think about your worst case scenario. You lose your job. So think about how much you need saved up to not feel stressed about finding another job immediately, because that's very stressful if you don't have work and you don't have much money in the bank account and you've got bills coming up. That's very stressful. And then also, like, how much would you need saved up to maintain some sort of similar lifestyle as you have now, even though you probably will cut back on your expenses. So from what I've heard from people that are smarter than me in the field of finances, like having 6 months plus of whatever your yearly earnings are saved up is a good idea. So for example, if you earn, so basically take your salary, your yearly salary, and cut that in half, and you want to try and aim, over a number of years, because it'll take you some time to save that up, especially if you're not a saver. But you want to have that saved up. And because you never know, even like smaller things that come up, like your car breaks down or something, that's not you losing your job. It's not as bad as that, but still your car breaks down and all of a sudden you need a new set of brakes or something like that, or a new whatever in your car. Like, you're gonna be super happy to have that saved. So and then last time we talked as well about just a bunch of different options for, like, what if you can't save? So we talked about reducing expenses, talked about a bunch of different options to earn even just a little bit of more money. Feel free to pause or screenshot this and just kind of read through these on your own and kind of do your Googling research, or just go back to the previous video where I talked about these in more depth. So anyway, let's jump into our actual topic for today, which is a 10-step process you can follow to structure a wide variety of classes, especially, again, for adults or even just, let's say, teenagers or older kids. It can also work there too. So we'll go through these 10 steps reasonably quickly, and then I want to get out of this out of this PowerPoint and actually open up and actually show you what this would look like, and actually open up Google, and we can pull out some readings, and I can actually show you and demo this. So this is a strategy that's based on readings. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you'll find a reading that is at the student's level. So usually the way I find it at the student's level, if you're like, how do I find that? I will first do an assessment. If you watch one of the earlier videos, I think it's one of the first videos, even maybe number 4, I talked about doing how to do like a rough level assessment. So you'll do a rough level assessment. You'll have a rough idea of their level. And then you're going to find a reading using Google, which I'll show you how to do in a moment, to find something that's roughly at their level. You're going to have the students read it out loud. You will correct any pronunciation mistakes they're making. I usually correct just major pronunciation mistakes. If it's minor pronunciation things, I let it go, for the most part anyway. Right? Then you'll read that reading out loud line by line, and you'll have the students copy you. You'll have the students read it again in their head, so quietly. Often when students read things out loud, they're not actually paying attention to what they're reading. They're not trying to actually understand it. They're focused just on the pronunciation. So I think it's valuable to give them 5-10 minutes just to read it again in their head and try to understand as much of it as they can. You're going to go through the key vocabulary together. So what words do you know, or you're pretty sure that they're not going to know, and you'll go through those. You might even do some key grammar potentially. Potentially, you might do some key grammar in here too. You'll read it, step 6, you'll read that same text line by line together and ensure that they understand what they're reading. As you go, you'll need to teach any grammar or vocab points as needed. So maybe there's a grammatical thing that comes up. Well, you might need to teach that grammar point either then and there or sometime in the near future, very, very quickly, to make sure that they're able to understand. Step 7, you give the students written comprehension questions. So this is, think of like in school where you get like a worksheet, or they give you like a worksheet that has comprehension questions. Like I'm a fan of that. Number 8, very important, which doesn't typically happen too much in many schools anyway, having an oral discussion about what you read, right? So you as the teacher would have different questions that you want to ask the group, ask the kids, or ask the adults, or ask the class about what you read. You'll have a discussion about it. Step 9, you'll have the students do a writing assignment or what you read together. So if you read something about, I don't know, I've got a Mario Lego comic thing here in front of me. Maybe you read about the rise of popularity of Mario. You read something about that. Who knows? Mario's getting more popular. Some news article. Maybe you'll ask them to write about their favorite video games growing up, right? Kind of a related topic. Or maybe you'll ask them, what do you think about Mario? Do you think it's going to become a more popular game? Is that something that you'd be really happy about? Would that be exciting for you? What kind of games did you play when you were a kid? You'll pick some writing topic that they'll write about. And then lastly, this maybe it's like a 9+1. I'm not sure it's really a step 10, but often, especially with adults, with kids too, with older kids as well, it can happen. Often while you're discussing, something comes up throughout the discussion, and you might pick that as your next topic. So I'll give you a great example. I had a class, this is a private class, but it still applies. It was a private class with a lady in Spanish, and we were talking about, I believe it was the history of, was it Mexico or Peru? One of the two, like it's slipping my mind right now. It's one of the two, Mexico or Peru. We're kind of reading about it, discussing it, talking about it. And while we're chatting, we happened to come across, somehow we stumbled upon the topic of like marriage. I think we're talking about how like marriages are, I think it was something like that, how marriages are different in South America. and how they're different and how we didn't really know if they're that different, and we were kind of discussing it. And then at that week, that led us to the topic of Indian weddings, because those are really different than a traditional Western wedding. So then I then sent her something to watch in Spanish about Indian weddings. And that was like the next topic we then talked about, right? And that kind of, so the discussion we had about history, funnily enough, led to our next topic, which ended up being weddings. So so all of a sudden that can kind of drive the class actually in many ways. And then I put a little asterisk at the bottom. You can follow this exact same process with listening related materials. So instead of finding something to read and following this process with something to read, you could follow something very similar with listening comprehension. So you could find a listening, so step one, you can find a video or an audio or a podcast at the student's level. You're not going to have them read it out loud. That doesn't really make any sense. You'd skip step two. You might pause line by line. You might listen to it together and make sure they're really understanding. You might follow step three. You probably won't do step four. If you're doing an audio related thing, you probably will cut that out. You'll still teach key vocabulary. You'll still go line by line and make sure that they understand what's going on. You'll still give them written comprehension questions. You'll still have an oral discussion. You'll still give them writing assignment, and still you might still allow the discussion to drive the next topic. So that's kind of the theory behind it. Let me switch the screen that I'm sharing here, and let me kind of do a demo of what this might look like. Okay, so let's just share. Let's just do this here. Let's share my internet screen here. So let's say we're preparing for, let's just say an English class, because if you're watching this video and you made it this far, you speak English. And so why don't we just pick something at English? And why don't we find something, let's say we figured out that the student is at a B1 level. They're at a B1, so they're kind of like this lower intermediate level. I'd go into Google, right? So our first step is we have to find a reading that's at their level. So B1, English, reading, texts. Let's Google it. You'll get lots, especially for English. Most major languages, you'll find lots of different websites here, right? So if we go to, what is this, learnenglish.britishcouncil.org, let's see what we have here. Look at that. They've got lots of things here. So I might go, a conference program. So I might print this out for the class, right? You might print it out. If it's online, then we might just do a screen share. I might just share the link with everybody, something like that. So step two, the students have to read it out loud, right? So let's say I'm the student, I'm a French student. Management styles with Elena Clark. Consider the different manage. Is that offensive? I don't know. But they read it out loud. Me as a teacher, I'm going to go and correct their pronunciation errors, right? I'm going to read it out loud and have the students copy. So I'd say management styles with Helena Clark, 9:30 to 10:45. The students say management styles with Helena Clark, 9:30 to 10:45. You're going to read out the whole thing together that way. The student step 4, the students will read this again in their heads, right? They'll read this together, in their heads. If it's a group class, you might even have them group off and get into groups actually, because then they can kind of discuss it together and go through it together. That's not a bad idea if it's a group class. It's actually a very good idea. I'm a big fan of that. You'll need to go through key vocabulary. So maybe key vocabulary in here, we might have something like management style. That's a pretty important thing. What is a management style? Well, let me explain what a management style is. It is maybe even like grammatically, we might have something like commands that are worth looking at. Consider the different management styles. That's a command. Explore the different ways to give feedback and maximize development. Help your employees. Your commands might be something worth looking at, right? So that's a grammar point we might explain. We're going to read it line by line, make sure everybody understands. That's step 6, right? Written comprehension questions. Often, if you find a website, often they'll even give you comprehension questions. Let's see if they have them. Let's see here. Do they have comprehension questions? Looks like they have a worksheet here. So the website might have even done it for you if you're lucky. If you're lucky, it's done for you. Even gave you one discussion question, which is nice for the oral part of it. You'll probably want more than one discussion question. You'll probably want more than that. I think you'll want at least 5 or 4, let's say 4, 5, 6, something like that. All right, so you'll have a discussion about this. So you might ask, which of the conference sessions would you attend? Why would you go? I might ask something like, I don't know, how do you take feedback? Like, here's a session on giving feedback, right? I might say, like, what are your thoughts on feedback? Like, when people give you feedback at work, like, how do you normally take it? Is it hard for you? Is it easy? Like, do you get nervous? Do you feel self-conscious? Like, how do you feel when people give you feedback? That might be a question you ask. Or who knows, right? Maybe you've got a class and you have people that work in leadership, right? And you might say, what kind of leadership lessons have you learned when you worked in such and such field? Joe, because Joe works in leadership. So you might ask Joe that question, and on and on and on and on, different discussion questions. The writing assignment on something like this could be, tell me about your favorite conference that you ever visited. This is about a conference, so you'll ask them about a conference they visited, and they'll write something about it. And then obviously your step 10 or final step is, depending on what came up in the discussion, we'll then potentially pick something out of there for the next reading that we do. So stop my screen share. So yeah, that's kind of the session for today. I think it's a little bit shorter than usual, a little bit. Yeah, but hopefully that's useful. I think for a lot of you, that should be useful. It's a very, very, very easy way to plan lessons, especially once you've done it a bunch and you've done it a few times. Like, it's almost too easy, actually, where you can just kind of fall into the habit of always doing that and like not trying to do things that are different, more interesting, things like that. So, but yeah, we'll finish up there. If people ever want to join this live and participate in our discussion and Q&A, you're always welcome to do so. I'll put a link in the YouTube description so you can do it. And yeah, we'll chat later. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.